Thank you. I'm particularly interested in what the 24-hour society means to the manager of a business or of an educational or governmental institution. And I believe that the implications are broader and more urgent than many people realize. I think we all know the 24-hour society means that some organizations need to operate multiple shifts, maybe even night shifts, to meet the market's appetite. There are lots of manufacturers of clothing, shoes, auto components, and electronics, for instance, that find they must run long hours in order to meet overseas demand. At the same time, they are finding that their overseas customers, often big companies from the U.S. who go abroad for suppliers, want cheaper prices, better quality, and faster delivery times. The same is true for other sorts of institutions. I just spoke with the director of a large government-funded institute in Mexico who recognizes a need to greatly increase his organization's productivity, even though that means changing some of the traditional ways they operate. For example, the institute has many layers of management, which get in the way of flexibility and innovation. The director is now comparing his institute with similar institutes in the U.S. and Europe because they are really part of a broader community. Their research is used by people all around the world, and in fact, many of their employees are visiting scientists from other countries. They can no longer afford to be a rigid, top-heavy organization, but the changes are going to be difficult to bring about. We discussed a 3 to 5 year time frame for this project. So globalization is affecting all organizations, not just businesses. For manufacturers, the 24-hour society has already translated into good business opportunities to export your products, except that these opportunities come with plenty of pressures and problems. You have to increase production, you have to cut prices, and you have to staff long or multiple shifts. And you have to be ready to retool or produce new products on a faster schedule than ever before. So finding, training, paying, and retaining good employees under these circumstances is of course difficult. But the hardest part is simply getting your people to meet the growing challenges and to help you outperform the market. The gradual shift toward a 24-hour clock within your organization, or at least your sector, creates some practical logistical problems you'll have to cope with. One of the key measures I look at in my client companies is the amount of overlap between individuals who need to collaborate in order to perform their work well. Overlap is when people are available to each other at the same time and place. Overlap permits people to reap the benefits of cooperation, and that's central to successful organizations everywhere. If people don't overlap as much, they are not able to communicate as freely, share their ideas, knowledge, and insights, or help each other with problems. They certainly cannot rise to the challenges of non-routine problems or creative opportunities. That's why overlap is a hidden driver of lots of good things in businesses. For example, managers who overlap more with their employees are more likely to have highly motivated employees who learn quickly and stay focused on key tasks. And managers who have less overlap with their employees tend to have more problems in areas such as employee turnover, poor working habits, dishonesty, and pilferage. So, something as simple as overlap with your employees can affect lots of aspects of human and organizational performance. That's why one U.S. company, RF Microdevices, is experimenting with shift schedules in its new semiconductor plant. Managers work from 8 in the morning to 5 at night, but the plant needs to run at least 12 hours a day to be economical. What's the best schedule for the plant? One good idea is to have it open from 10 in the morning to 10 at night, which avoids traditional rush hours for the workers who commute, and it maximizes overlap with the management and office staff. The institute I spoke of earlier does not need multiple shifts, yet it may still run into this overlap problem as it reduces administrative layers and encourages more innovation and initiative. Spans of control will inevitably become larger for each manager as layers are reduced. That means a manager who once needed to find time to communicate with just 5 or 6 employees will now need to communicate with 15 or 20. So unless we find creative ways to increase the natural overlap, communication will go down dramatically at a time when the organization needs more communication, not less. When overlap is low, then employees complain that they do not have good access to information. They say that their managers don't communicate well with them. And you know what? That's exactly what most employees do say today. In fact, in one recent survey, U.S. employees said that open, honest communication was their top priority when looking for work. They just don't have enough good communication with their managers. And in my own studies of creativity and motivation at work, I find there are lots of other communications issues too. For example, many employees believe that their managers don't listen to their ideas, and employees describe their managers as lacking in understanding and empathy. So already we are seeing problems in how managers and employees communicate. There will be many more problems as the 24-hour society pressures your organization and reduces overlap, unless you make an effort to build new and better channels of communication. And open communication is key to effective motivational management. In the U.S., we've started doing a lot more training of supervisors in listening skills, collaboration, motivation, and teamwork. These interpersonal skills are increasingly important in the 24-hour economy. And I'm also experimenting with ways of throwing people together through new uses of space and time. Community areas in offices, team-based project plans, and scheduled training or planning sessions all help build overlap. When problems or pressures come up and you want your people to problem solve or innovate, then a high overlap environment is what you want. If not, you'll see lots of other problems too, including conflicts between people and complaints about how they are treated. Yet what happens when you have to add shifts or permit employees to work extended or irregular hours? Overlap goes down. What happens when you cut layers of management and become a flatter organization? Overlap goes down. And what happens when your operations fragment as you add more sites or collaborate with other organizations? Overlap goes down. People can work for months or years without overlapping in some of the newer organizations I've seen. The normal, natural interactions between people are lost. Same thing with the increasing use of modern shipping and communication technologies to create far-flung operations. People working on the same business processes may be in different countries and time zones and work for different employers. Unless you work on it, they will never overlap with each other. I'm troubled by what I already see the 24-hour society doing to the culture of businesses around the world. Changing an organization's structure and strategies helps it meet the demands of the 24-hour society, to be sure. But it also creates a host of new human challenges that I fear we need to address before they do any more hidden damage to our organizations. As always, I find that management problems and pressures come down to their impact on people. Organizations may look like piles of financial assets when you examine their balance sheets, but in truth, they are really groups of people, people who get work done and, hopefully, add value by doing it. So to truly understand the consequences of any trend, including a major trend like the 24-hour society, you've got to look at the human impact of that trend. In my work, I do a lot with employee motivation and performance. For instance, I have a new book out describing my approach to motivating and rewarding employees so as to get the maximum performance possible from them and from the processes that they staff. And I find, as I report in that book, that almost all managers greatly underestimate the importance of how employees feel. If people feel good about their jobs, they do a good job. They can be motivated to exceptional performance levels when the right emotional foundations underlie performance. But if they feel neutral or negative, their performance will be mediocre or poor. As I report in my new book, Motivating and Rewarding Employees, you can't motivate people until they feel good about working. Just because they show up for work, you can't assume they are ready to do an exceptional job. Unless you treat your people better than average, why should they do a better than average job? And if your people aren't doing a better than average job, how can you expect your organization to perform above average? It all comes down to your people. And here's a really interesting finding from a manager's perspective. It comes from the consulting firm Circon International, which helped me with the research for my new book. In studies of U.S., Latin American, and Japanese companies that included interviews with millions of employees, we found that employee motivation drives 40 to 50% of the variation in profits. Now, how do we know that? Because we've done statistical analysis of a database that includes information on both employee attitudes and bottom-line organizational performance. This database includes lots of different kinds of organizations from many countries, and the findings are generalized. Now, I should add that the academic literature on employee attitudes does not always support this strong link from attitudes to profits. That's because most published studies look at employee satisfaction. Yet satisfaction alone is not a good predictor of organizational performance. Employees can be satisfied for many reasons. Some employees might be satisfied because they are being challenged to perform well, while others are satisfied because they are not being challenged. They are happy that they aren't being pushed too hard. So when I say employee attitudes predict and drive profits, I don't mean the typical attitude measures that are popular today. I mean specifically measures of variables that we know are vital to good performances. We measure things like desire to work and organizational commitment. We also measure employee attitudes toward their managers. Do employees feel that their managers are fair and concerned? Do employees say that their managers provide a high level of job structure and support? When you ask employees their attitudes about variables such as these, you find that you can predict bottom-line organizational performance. Whether it is productivity, profitability, quality, or other results you need, these attitudes have a strong influence on them. And you can identify specific problem areas that, if fixed by changes in management style and strategy, will produce improved organizational performance. So, how employees feel about their work affects roughly half of the variation in your results. Most managers are surprised to see that their people have such a big impact on the bottom line. The human factor is much more important than most of us realize, and we don't spend as much time thinking about it as we should. By the way, you can find more information on this issue in a free self-study course on my website at streetwisemotivation.com. So you can see why I'm so interested in the impact of the 24-hour society on the people of your organization. Will this trend help or hurt their basic job motivation? Will it boost productivity or reduce it? The basic question is, what impact will the 24-hour economy have on your people and their work performance? But that really needs to be broken down into two closely related questions. And the first question is the obvious one, and I've already talked about it. How will the 24-hour economy affect the work environment in which your people operate? For instance, if it gradually reduces the overlap between people in your organization, there would be a significant impact on their work environment. And when we recognize that impact, we can decide if we want to compensate for it. Another example is the possibility that people's work hours will clash with their natural biological rhythms, making them less productive. To be honest, these kinds of issues are not the most interesting ones to me. I'm even more interested in how the 24-hour economy changes the success factors for businesses and the people who work within them. So far, we have assumed the work itself will stay the same in the 24-hour economy. Just the timing and organization of the work will change. But that is not a safe assumption. There are very good reasons to believe that the nature of work itself is changing and must change a great deal more. So an even more important question is, what new challenges might your people face because of the major changes resulting from our rush to a global 24-hour economy? You see, it is entirely possible that their job requirements will change even more than their job environments, in which case they may have to do a different sort of job to succeed. What kind of job do you need done by your people? Are your performance requirements likely to change? Yes, they are. Specifically, job requirements are now changing because of the changes in your organization's operating environment. even if your people still work regular hours, the things they need to do in their work are changing. How? To answer this question, we have to look at how the 24-hour economy, with its heightened level of competition, affects your organization's strategic requirements. Global competition is a natural consequence of faster and better transportation and communications. And the simple fact that populations continue to grow around the world adds to the level of competition too, because there are more and more customers and competitors out there in your organization's economic environment. And there is another important driver of change in the 24-hour economy: technology. There is good evidence that product life cycles are getting shorter every year. So you can count on your basic product, service, production, or distribution technologies going out of date soon. Technology keeps the heat on in our 24-hour society and forces us all to compete at a higher level than we might prefer. In the 24-hour economy, businesses operate in what Professor H. Igor Ansoff of United States International University's School of Business has characterized as a high level of turbulence. By that, he means that your organization faces complex markets, that the future is unlikely to be a repeat of the past, and that it is hard to see the future very clearly. These three factors add up to a growing number of surprises for your organization. Today, almost every business faces a rising level of turbulence. And according to Dr. Ansoff's extensive studies of success factors in businesses and governmental organizations around the world, there is only one way to manage in a turbulent environment. You have to be more entrepreneurial, innovative, and creative. Organizations that behave more creatively find ways to profit from surprises. Traditional organizations, with their emphasis on stability and efficiency, eventually fail in highly turbulent environments. Therefore, to succeed in the 24-hour economy, with its growing level of competition and its increasing rate of surprises, you need to make your organization behave more creatively. It has to become flexible and daring. It has to create its own environment and surprise everyone else. I figure that's why I'm increasingly asked to help organizations get rid of the barriers to creativity and innovation. I often find that companies are frustrated that their workers and managers are not good at being creative. There is a lack of innovation, an inability to generate new and better approaches in most organizations today. In fact, when organizations have their employees complete a personal creativity assessment, that's one of the products my firm develops, they usually discover that their people face lots of barriers or obstacles to keep them from being creative. By identifying such barriers, managers are able to chip away at them and gradually boost the level of innovation. Are your people ready to help you achieve this goal of an innovative organization that will succeed in a turbulent 24-hour economy? I'm afraid not, because this strategic goal imposes some new job requirements that are going to be difficult. Specifically, it demands employees who are creative and innovative, both as individuals and teams, are adaptable and flexible in the face of change, are self-motivated so that they constantly seek new challenges and opportunities, and are highly mature emotionally so that they can handle the responsibilities of being creative, adaptable, and self-motivated. When I visit organizations to work on employee motivation and innovation, I usually meet managers who complain that their people are none of the above. Maybe you feel the same way about your people too. Are they hesitant to innovate or to try new and better ideas? Do they wait to do what somebody tells them instead of taking the initiative? Do they resist change instead of making changes? Do they prefer to do things the same old way instead of learning new ways? And do they seem to lack the emotional maturity needed to take charge of their own and the organization's fate? If so, then you have a fairly typical workforce. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But it does mean that you need to begin developing it into a better workforce, one that is ready and willing to take you into the 24-hour economy. So, How can you help your people make the important transition from clock punchers to innovators? How can you develop a workforce that is appropriate to a highly turbulent global economy? Well, one thing is for certain. You can't just get rid of your current employees and hire all new ones. How your people behave is largely a factor of how they are managed. So, bringing in new people won't change the behavior of your workforce. As long as you run your organization the same old way, you'll get the same old results from your people. That's the bad news, but it is also the good news. It means that you don't have to focus on changing your people, which is a very hard thing to do. Instead, you can focus on changing the way you manage them, and then they will change their own behavior in response. My work in creativity and motivation has led me to see that there are basically two different management paths. You are probably on what I call the resistance path right now, and to make the switch to the kind of company that can profit most from a 24-hour economy, you need to get off that resistance path and onto the motivation path. What do these terms mean? Well, the resistance path is where you push your people uphill, and the motivation path is where they run up the hill, pulling you after them. Traditional organizations always use resistance-oriented styles of management. They control behavior. They encourage people to perform for rewards or to avoid punishments. On the resistance path, you apply pressure to get performance. More pressure, more performance. Let up the pressure for a moment, and performance falls, which may be okay if you are getting sufficient productivity out of your people already. But when you need people to be flexible, creative, imaginative, and entrepreneurial, the resistance path is not for you. Employees on the resistance path don't see opportunities, they see problems. Their glass is always half empty. That's why they resist pressures to perform or change. Their basic mental attitude is negative. They think it's us against them. They are never truly team players. They are motivated by extrinsic or external factors. They are only good for routine, repetitive tasks that can be tightly controlled. And there will be fewer and fewer of these tasks in the 24-hour economy. In contrast, employees on the motivation path are optimists. Their glasses are always half full, not half empty. They see every problem as an opportunity. They want to learn, grow, change, and rise to new heights. They are self-motivated. We call it intrinsic or internal motivation because it bubbles up from within. They will do wonderful work as long as you don't get in their way. And on this motivation path, employees are more creative and innovative, and they like changes. They get bored easily. The more turbulent the business environment and the more challenging their work requirements, the better. But let me go back to what I was saying about management style driving employee behavior. It turns out that the same employees can be on either the resistance path or the motivation path. It depends entirely on how they are managed. If you want more creative, self-motivated employees, then you have to manage in a different style. It's that simple. Of course, it may take a while to make a full transition, but you can do it. Any organization can. How? Let me show you a simple example. In one company we studied for my new book on motivation, we found there were two almost identical factories. These factories make the same things in the same way, except one performs better than the other. It produces more at lower cost, with less waste and errors. Why is it more profitable? It's hard to explain the difference until you look closely at the people who work in the two plants. The only significant difference we could find was the level of employee motivation. At the better plant, employees were more motivated, so motivation alone was driving the difference. But why were they more motivated? Looking further, we found that managers behaved somewhat differently at these two plants. At the most successful plant, managers were more people-oriented. They put more effort into supporting their people. They had begun to make the shift off the resistance path and onto the motivation path. As a result, employees at the better factory felt that their managers were more concerned, considerate, and fair, and that made them more motivated to perform, which in turn produced higher performance levels for the factory. In fact, these differences in how managers behave toward their employees produced about a 20% difference in bottom line results. This case illustrates one of the 3 key management behaviors that is needed to make the switch to a turned-on workforce that can rise to the challenges of today's business environment. Managers need to emphasize 3 things, and they need to emphasize these 3 things a lot more than they have in the past. First, they need to focus on supporting their people. People are our most important asset is a common slogan among managers. But truly, most companies don't behave as if they really believe this slogan. In my research, I find that most managers pay very little attention to the human side of management. The most common management style is delegation. Managers simply say, "Go do this." They don't worry about how the person feels, whether the task offers too much or too little challenge, or whether the person is motivated to do the task. Delegating ignores the human side of management, and it also ignores the task side of management. It does not provide enough structure and direction for most employees. At the other extreme, I've found that the least common style of management is empathetic or considerate management. Consideration is when the manager takes time to figure out how the employee thinks and feels. Employees rate their managers as extremely low in empathy and consideration. In fact, most employees say that their managers are inconsiderate. To be more considerate, managers need to listen more carefully and less judgmentally to what their employees say. And they need to think about how their employees feel. Why is it important to worry about how your people feel? Because on the motivation path, employees are self-motivated by feelings such as enthusiasm, optimism, and a desire for personal achievement and recognition. Employees who have positive feelings like these will take initiative. They will behave creatively to solve problems and pursue opportunities. They will suggest changes instead of resisting changes. There is a vital emotional foundation to high job motivation, and managers have to build that foundation. To do so, they have to first attend to how their people feel. As the old Chinese saying goes, to lead the people, you have to walk behind them. Second, managers need to focus harder on structuring tasks and giving good feedback. Now, if you are highly empathetic and considerate to your people, you can create enthusiasm for your goals and plans. That builds high motivation, but it is not enough, not nearly enough, because being nice alone does not make for good management. In fact, as another saying goes, nice guys finish last. But they can finish first if they add a focus on structuring employees' work. High structure has to be combined with high consideration to produce exceptional results, especially in the 24-hour economy. What do I mean by high structure? Not what you might think. Controls like arbitrary rules and regulations, excessive paperwork, or locked doors do not do the trick. In fact, they just counteract the consideration you've shown, and they make employees feel small again. Instead, you need to structure the specific tasks your employees perform. Don't structure people, structure tasks. When you delegate a task, for example, you can add structure by setting key performance goals with the employees. Performance goals tell the employee what to aim for. They provide a scoreboard to track progress. Many jobs are like games in which employees aren't sure of the rules or the score. That's because managers just delegate without providing enough structure. Specific, well-defined performance goals are the cornerstone of good task structure. And when those goals have a good level of challenge, they are highly motivating. What's a good level of challenge? Well, they should not be too easy and dull, and they should not be so hard that failure is likely. As a manager, you should always be managing the level of challenge in each task. On top of performance goals, you have to also ensure that employees get lots of informative, accurate feedback. For example, if you want employees to make fewer errors, the best way is to tell them exactly what your goal is, and then provide clear measurements of their progress toward that goal. Even better, teach them to measure so they can track their own progress toward the goal. I've seen dramatic improvements in quality, cost, and productivity, along with improvements in employee attitude, when employees learn to measure their own work and to generate their own feedback. In another book I wrote some time ago called Closing the Quality Gap, I report on how some of the leading US, European, and Japanese companies created quality teams and taught them to measure errors and productivity. As a result, these employees achieved dramatic breakthroughs in performance that gave their businesses significant bottom-line benefits. And the employees loved the experience too, because they were able to switch from doing a routine, dull job to inspiring goals that they could pursue. Even when pay stayed level, job motivation and performance went way up. And by the way, these quality practices are now being adopted successfully in some educational and healthcare institutions, so they are not limited just to businesses. So you need to provide more feedback, especially feedback that is based on performance information. I'm reminded of the old saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, but teach him to fish and he'll never go hungry again. When you teach employees how to measure and track their own performance, you are teaching them to fish. That's so much easier than having to stand over them and say, good job or bad job, constantly. When employees have to depend on their supervisor's opinion to find out if their work is good or bad, then their feedback is too controlling, and it will encourage them to resist managers' efforts to improve their performance. On the motivation path, feedback needs to be more informative and less controlling. As we gradually adapt our organizations to the 24-hour economy, I think you'll find that there is a shift from controlling, manager-driven feedback to informative, employee-generated feedback. Managers will set the goals and teach employees how to measure their progress. That's a new and in many ways more pleasant and rewarding role for managers as well as for employees. Third, you need a focus on innovation. So far, I've talked about how managers need to take better care of their people by attending to their feelings. And I've talked about how managers need to provide more task structure through performance goals and feedback. These two initiatives go hand in hand, and they bring a wide range of benefits to any organization. But we are particularly concerned with organizations that are feeling the pressures of a highly turbulent 24-hour economy. And so the question for today is, will these two practices help your organization do better in today's turbulent environment? Yes, especially to the extent that an emphasis on people and tasks helps your organization become more innovative and quick to pursue opportunities. Employees who are given more consideration and more structure are far more likely to innovate and to embrace change. So these two focuses help you develop a more innovative organization, but they do not ensure that your people will be as creative and adaptable as you want. Unfortunately, there are often major barriers within businesses that block innovation and creativity. Most businesses stifle their employees' creativity, and most people are at their least creative when at work. And so you need to think about one more thing as you prepare your workforce for the 24-hour economy. You need to think about how to reduce barriers to creativity and encourage your people to be more creative. For example, do you ask all of your people for their ideas and suggestions? Do you listen respectfully to what they have to say? Do you give them opportunities to think at work, not just to act? Do you ever bring in trainers or facilitators to help your people learn to be more innovative in their work? Many organizations invest the bare minimum in creativity. As a result, they get the bare minimum in return. So the final factor you need to focus on more closely is being a creative organization. It won't happen unless you make it a priority. And with the growing pressures of the 24-hour economy, breathing on all our backs, you really do need to make innovation a top priority for sustainable success. Thank you.